We are back for episode number 7 of the Building with Breven podcast. And once again, excited to be back for another episode and another week. And we've got a really good topic for today's discussion. We're going to dive into the different types of contracts that you're going to most likely see with a custom builder as you progress forward with the builders that you're shortlisted, or even you've selected a builder and they've presented contract options to you. So hoping to dig a little bit more into that. But Bryan, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Like you said, happy to be back. And the topic today of fixed price versus cost plus is one that I feel like we've been dangling out there over the last several episodes, saying we're going to talk about this in a future podcast and get into more of the details. And that's what we're going to do today, and spend what we believe is an appropriate amount of time talking about the pros and cons of the two predominant types of contracts, being fixed price and cost plus. So with no further ado, you want to jump into it?
Yeah, well said. And like you said, enough of hinting at these different kinds of contracts. Let's get into the nitty gritty of them. So the best way to do this, we've broken it down into, just like Bryan mentioned, 2 different types of contracts that I believe, or we believe, most people will see in custom home builders throughout the US, at least, right? These are standard contracts for the most part, promulgated contracts or promulgated forms, and ones that I would say the majority of builders are using. So those 2 contracts are going to be, number 1, fixed price contracts, and number 2 would be a cost plus contract. So I think maybe real quickly, Bryan, we can jump into just exactly what those are, right? Sum it up for listeners that didn't listen to our previous podcast or just tuning in now. And then we can kind of go into the pros and cons of each of those. So you want to tell us a little bit more about what a fixed price contract is?
For sure. Fixed price contract is a contract where you, as the homeowner, and the builder agree to a fixed price before any construction has begun, with a specific number of items that are included or excluded from the contract, right? So a fixed price contract can look a number of ways, but it is a all-in price of X dollars, and that includes, say, site prep and building the home and doing flat work and driveways once the house is completed, and landscaping. But it might exclude, for example, some unknowns, right? If utilities are not at the property, it might be hey, here's the fixed price for doing all of this work, but excludes the cost and maybe some unknowns to get, for example, say, electricity or water or something to the lot, because it's currently not there. The other thing with the fixed price contract is to clearly understand what is included for allowances if selections have not been made when a fixed price contract is executed or signed. So it might be, hey, well, this fixed price contract is worth $1.3 million, and it includes $20,000, for example, for plumbing fixtures. Okay, well, what's included in plumbing fixtures? That might include the water heater. It might exclude the water heater. So to not get further in the weeds, there's a lot of caveats, but really that's what a fixed price contract is, so that when costs fluctuate throughout the build, the homeowner is not going to realize or see any changes. You are locked into that price with some minor exceptions that we'll dive into here in a bit.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's great. And just touching back on that, but the last thing you said, I think it's really locking in a price is kind of the best way to look at it. So getting to an agreement with the builder before a contract is signed, or as part of the signed contract, this is the price that we propose we can build this home on this lot for you, right? And then there's, of course, exclusions and allowances and other caveats that come with that. But for the most part, those overall costs are very dialed in and should get you comfort and get you close to a final number that you're going to be looking at. So that's fixed price. Thanks for elaborating on that. So
the other thing I'd like to add there is, if a builder is proposing a fixed price contract to you, they obviously and clearly have a lot of preparation work or preliminary work that has to be done to ultimately feel confident in that number for the sake of themselves and the risk that they take on and for you, right? So it typically involves some preparation work, which often coincides with some other preliminary building agreements like we do here at Breven Homes, or some other form of work that has to be done before you get to that point.
Yep. Yeah, good addition there, that it does take more legwork up front to feel confident in those numbers from a builder perspective, and even from a homeowner perspective, right? They have a better idea of what they're building. So yeah, good to get those details ironed out beforehand. Now, you want to tell us a little bit more about cost plus, and then we can jump into some of these pros and cons that we've got written down for each.
So a cost plus contract is where a builder provides you as the homeowner we'll call it, there's going to be some interchangeable words here, a quote or an estimate that is provided based off of just historical knowledge, or hey, we know that our particular trade charges this much per square foot, or it could be a number of things to get to that number, but it's fairly granular and it's broken down by the most common building costs, right? So that could be, here's the foundation costs, here's frame, here's drywall, all the different costs. And that is provided to you as, we'll call it open book, transparently of, hey, here are all the costs associated with this project, with the addition of a builder's fee, or essentially the builder's profit, which is open and available for you to see. So better known as either most likely it's a markup saying, hey, here the total cost to build this home, we estimate. And for our service of building this home and handing the keys over to you, the homeowner, we're going to charge a X% markup above and beyond these costs, right? So in a nutshell, that's what a cost plus contract is. It's showing, it's exposing and sharing all of the costs throughout the build, and balancing or comparing those to an initial estimate, which hopefully is fairly accurate.
Yep. Yeah. Well said there. And once again, touching on the last couple of things you said, that you are comparing the budget or the quote or the estimate, a lot of interchangeable words there, once again, towards the actuals and where you come in at the end. So there's maybe some room for more variance there. But yeah, the costs are transparent. They are disclosed to the buyer, and then the builder's markup is added on top of that. So that would be the cost plus. Yep. So awesome. Well, yeah, good breakdowns there. Let's flip back to fixed price, and let's go through the pros and cons of a fixed price contract so that we can try to present these in the most unbiased or just kind of neutral way possible, right? Of course, we have ways that we like to position our contracts, and we find the most valuable, honestly, or the best situation for our buyers and also for us, right? So there's ways that we've found success in, but that doesn't necessarily make them the right way to do it or the best way for every builder in the nation. So with that being said, yeah, let's talk about some pros and cons and just let the listeners know a lot more and be able to make a much more informed decision as they're shopping builders. So you want to hit us with maybe the first pro of a fixed price contract?
Yeah, I think, and we've already touched on this with one of the pros of a fixed price, and that's an accurate initial quote / estimate is agreed upon before the building or construction actually starts, to help you plan financially, right? So typically, no matter how much money you have or what your situation is, you still have to plan and budget accordingly for okay, where am I going to get this money, and when do I need it to complete this home? So it's typically in the form of two different ways. Either you have the cash or other assets that you convert to cash to pay for the construction costs, or a very common route for many is a construction loan, right? But this all needs to be decided upon early on of, well, how much money do I need? And in a fixed price contract, you're going to have oftentimes more confidence and accuracy in here's how much money I need earlier than in a cost plus contract. So that's pro number one. And another pro is that you have the peace of mind that prices are locked in, even if costs increase. We all know where we have come from with the pandemic, COVID-19, inflation at a significantly higher rate than it's been in a very long time, and the risks that brings to cost plus contracts. So I know we're focused on fixed price, but that the benefit here is, no matter what happens, you have the peace of mind to be able to sleep at night with probably less anxiety that, hey, no matter what changes, I'm comfortable with this number very early on in the build, that I can enjoy the rest of the experience. And that's really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like what you said there, that, well, even touching on COVID and all that process and going through that, I think we saw personally a lot of builders in our area, in particular, they were switching to cost plus contracts if they hadn't already, right? Because of the inflation that you talked about running rampant. Everybody, I think, that was somewhat even interested or connected to building in any sense knew that lumber was going through the roof. That's gone all over the place since then. But, with those lumber prices just going absolutely crazy, builders were trying everything they could to protect themselves, whether that was cost plus contracts or a fixed price contract with escalation clauses. And maybe that's a good segue to the cons of a fixed price contract, Bryan. So you want to talk us through some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a perfect segue. Is one of the cons being the escalation clauses, right? So obviously there's some things that are outside of all of our control, like inflation, like rapid price increases on commodities like lumber, that can put us all in a really bad spot and say, hey, somebody has to pay for this because we have to complete the project. So in most contracts I'll call it post-COVID, if I may, you're finding the fixed price contracts are having an escalation clause. If a cost increases more than so much percent, some of that or all of that, or however it's worded, that additional cost is able to be passed on to the homeowner. And that's something that nobody ever wants to be in the middle of. Nobody ever wants to have to work that clause or have that conversation, but it needs to be agreed upon up front that if this were to happen, this is how it's going to be handled, and everybody's agreeing to it early on. Now, we obviously here at Breven Homes try and do everything in our power to avoid having to use that clause, right? Because it's not good for anybody, but there still has to be some protection mechanism in place. The second con is, in a fixed price contract, there is the potential fear of sacrificing quality or time for the builder to save money and ultimately put more money in their pocket, right? So if it's a fixed price, okay, well, I can get a cheaper, for example, a cheaper framer that's going to take, he's going to frame the house in 3 months instead of my normal framer that's going to take 1 month, and I'm going to save money, right? For example. So you're not going to see that savings, but the builder does. And so sometimes it's a fear, other times it's not, but I'm going to go back to using that word that we have used time and time again in these episodes, that it comes down to trust. That, hey, I'm choosing a builder on my short list to embark on this journey together, that I trust that they are not going to do things like that. And also asking the builder, hey, what is a reasonable timeline? Before I sign this fixed price agreement, when are you going to be able to hand the keys over to me? And am I okay with that? Do I accept that, understanding that, yes, that give or take some margin of error of estimating there, that if they say, hey, it's going to take 12 months and it takes 13 months, okay, it's not the end of the world. But if, hey, here's your fixed price contract and it's going to take 2 years and you think it could and realistically take 12 months, those are all conversations that have to be had early on, and it comes back to that trust factor.
Yep. Yeah, good way to wrap that up. And trust is one of those things that we continue to talk about, right? That's going to be a common theme throughout all of our episodes, I would imagine. But yeah, you really said it well that, you really have to find that builder that you trust, because a lot of normal consumers, I'll be honest, or home buyers may not know the right amount of time that it takes to complete sheetrock, or for instance, on their particular home. So with that in mind, right, who's to say that the builder can't add a couple days, right? Because they were able to find a sheetrocker that was a little bit slower, but more competitive price wise. So just to talk through these cons, right, just to be fully transparent with these two different types of contracts, that is one of those maybe fears or just something to consider when shopping a builder. But Bryan, you're absolutely right when you say that up front going into the build, the builder should have a pretty good idea of how long that home is going to take to complete, right? So some things may go over time, of course, frame might take a week longer, but you can try to make it up in other areas, right? But I think the big thing is that, you just want to have something discussed with the builder and have that sense of trust that what they're telling you is going to be as accurate as possible. Now, on that escalation clause topic, I wanted to just add that typically escalation clauses, the way that looks is it's an agreed upon percentage that the builder and the buyer agree upon at this stage in the contract. So with fixed price contracts, typically a builder will have, it could be 2%, it could be 10% of an escalation clause. So if you have $100,000 in the budget for a lumber package, and it goes up to $111,000, that extra $1,000 or anything over 10% would initiate the escalation clause. So just an example there for people that are going through this, right? And like I said, those percentages can look different ways. The escalation clauses can look different ways, but that's just a very rough example. Anything else to add on fixed price contracts, Bryan?
No, I think that's it. I think I just want to make it clear again on the fear of sacrificing quality or time. I want to make that very clear that it's a potential con, but it's also important that that's something that can be overcome by just asking the right questions, like we've talked about in a previous episode, to a builder and addressing those head on. So it's here, but it's something that I think is one of the easier ones that can be addressed and removed from one of the potential negatives of a fixed price contract, right? But still important to recognize and understand that it could be a major issue, but it can be eliminated.
That brings up a good point too. And another thing to look at is quality, right? Some people might have a fear of quality if they're going with a fixed price contract. Who's to say that the builder isn't going to choose a subcontractor that is lesser quality, but can get the job done for the same timeline and the same price? Back to that trifecta, of course. But with that in mind, that's when it's really important that you've contacted the builder's references. You've also seen a home or walked a model home that the builder has already built, so that the quality that they're telling you they are going to build for you. And then you can get a really good judge of that and be able to hold them accountable. So just another little piece there, that before you get into these contracts, you should have an idea of the timeline, you should have an idea of the quality, and this fixed price versus cost plus discussion is where you would feel comfortable getting into the pricing or the cost of the build. So without further ado, let's jump into the cost plus pros, right? So now we're switching gears. We're jumping into the second second sort of contract, which is the cost plus. Yeah, Bryan, tell us about the first pro there.
One of the benefits of a cost plus contract for those homeowners that like understanding a little bit more about the costs is that you have more transparency in those building costs, right? So you can understand, hey, this is how much any one of these particular parts of the build is going to cost, and may help you in making some decisions of, well, I don't want to spend that much for a smooth finish on my drywall when I thought I did, but I want to go back and just go with, say, a standard drywall that has a more simple textured finish, for example. And so if you're one of those people that likes to be a little bit more in the weeds, this can be something that you would really appreciate in terms of just understanding what all's going into this build.
I think, and one thing to add there, that was a good touch point. One thing to add is this is a good way if there's two builders that are both proposing a cost plus contract to you and you're still trying to decide between the two builders. This is where it's a little bit more easy. And I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but to compare those two builders apples to apples. You may see where one builder has, say, $10 a square foot for paint on the whole house, right? Okay. How does the other builder stack up to that? Are they putting $4 a square foot? Okay. Well, which one is off and what are you going to get quality wise for that $4 a square foot? Right. And maybe paint isn't that important to you. So you think, okay, well, you know what? I'm willing to go with the lower bid there, the lower line item. But that's where it's so much more transparent, as you can go through line by line, truly compare a builder to another builder or a trade to another trade. And if you have friends, say you have a painter that's a friend, hey, can you do this for cheaper than $4 a square foot, right? Or can you do it better than $4 a square foot for this quality? It gets real transparent, but also it gets a little bit, maybe chaotic's the wrong word, but then you have people that want to try to outbid or outprice. And by people, I mean buyers that have a family friend that does sheetrock, and will the builder let you bring your own sheetrocker? So that's a little caveat there, but something that we've seen as well on a cost plus contract, that the homeowners know exactly what you're spending on every line item. And of course they want to have a say in it. And if they can do something for cheaper, have a friend that can do something for cheaper, probably an option that they're going to want to explore. So some builders are open to that, some aren't. And that's a good question to ask your builder up front as well on a contract like this.
And something else to consider there, oftentimes builders will not be real interested in taking, I know we're getting a slight bit off topic here, but be interested in taking trades that you might have a friend or I know somebody and I think we can do it cheaper. You have to respect and understand that the builders in the business to do this is their full-time job. Hopefully they are professionals, and you have to recognize that at some point, let them do their job, and you can have too many cooks in the kitchen and it can actually make it worse, not better. Right. So I think you just have to be cognizant of that as well.
Correct. And yeah, really good points there. And just because your friend knows how to do sheetrock doesn't make them the best option, right? They could be the cheapest option, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do it as fast or as good quality as maybe the builder's sheetrock subcontractor. So just using that as an example there once again, but very good points that, yeah, a lot of builders are not willing to work with those kind of things because they've spent so long building their trade base and know who they can trust and know the quality and know the time and all that good stuff. So yeah, good little aside there.
And pro number 2 is, I think, part of the description of a cost plus contract, but it's worth reiterating. If prices are to decrease or there are savings that are found, then the buyer is going to realize those savings, and that money, in my air quotes, is going to be put back in the buyer's pocket, the homeowner's pocket, right? So if, for example, the foundation is on the initial estimate is to be $100,000, but the all-in cost once the home is completed and we know everything is done with 100% certainty comes in at $90,000, well, then you're essentially, you could argue, again, in air quotes, you're saving $10,000 from your initial estimate or where your initial expectations were.
Yep. Yeah. Really good distinction there. And to compare that to a fixed price contract, same thing goes there as well, except that money goes into the builder's pocket, not the buyer's pocket, for the simple fact that the price has been locked in. Good for the builder for saving some money, and that's a little bit of an incentive for the builder to save those money or save the money. But just kind of comparing those two there.
Yeah, for sure. You want to jump into the cons of cost plus?
Yeah, let's do that. So I would say number one con of cost plus is that the builders make more money as the cost or the price of the build go up. So as you guys can probably imagine, that's a potential conflict of interest. As prices increase or a trade comes back and says, hey, my price is now increased because I want it to, no backing, whatever, whether it's right or wrong, if that price increases, the builder is making more money. So it doesn't always incentivize the builder to go out and shop for the cheapest option. And now I'm not saying that the cheapest option is always the best, but it's a little bit of a weird dynamic there where as the price of the build and the cost of the build increase, the builder is also making more money since their markup is on top of the total cost. So, Bryan, anything to add there?
No, just again, something to be very cognizant of. And if you choose to move forward with a builder that is suggesting or providing a cost plus contract, that you make sure you have, again, the trust and that the builder is not going to make decisions solely at your expense on driving the cost of the build up for their own good or their own pocketbook. So again, I think you said it's not all about who is the cheapest, because we've all been down that road, even in our personal life, that you typically don't want the cheapest, especially when you're building a custom home, but it's a fine balance.
For sure. Now I want to add that there are some builders and there are some contracts that are cost plus, but any overages, the builder does not make a markup on. They still can charge it to the client or the homeowner or the buyer, but they don't make any additional money above that. So they set a price and say, look, this is a cost plus contract. We're going to make X% over this price. If prices fluctuate above that, say lumber goes up, paint goes up, whatever, the builder is not making additional profit on top of those already overages. So, something to really think through, and there's caveats to every contract, but that's one to be aware of here.
That's a good point. And I think that there are ways to do that. My only point or comment to make to that is, I think if you do embark on a cost plus with a ceiling on it, if we can call it that, just make sure that you're comfortable with how the builder is going to do the accounting and the bookkeeping on that, right? Because you just want to be able to understand that. You deserve to know that. And I think a lot of builders are professional builders. They're really good at building, but you want to make sure that their back office is organized and knows how to administer that.
Yep. Very good points there. Very good points. Yeah. We'll have to do a podcast where we break down construction finance and stuff like that in a little bit more detail on what people can expect as they're getting into their custom build. But yeah, let's jump into the last con as we're coming up to time here. Cost plus, second con here, and the last one we've got written down is going to be that the initial estimate, quote, whatever we want to call it, that the builder presents to the buyer, it can be inaccurate, and it can potentially cause financial hardship. And like Bryan had talked about earlier, there are some builders that do this different ways. Many builders do this different ways. But if it's an estimate and the builder is going off of historical data or what they've done around the corner on a different lot, different home, that can definitely lead to inaccurate numbers up front. And they give you present you that number. Here's your cost. Here's our markup on top of that. This is a cost plus contract and it's subject to fluctuation. as prices increase, which I think most people know, in construction, prices tend to go up more times than they go down. And that can lead to a pinch financially for buyers, even banks, and an unpleasant position for the builder as well when you get towards the end of the build and you're all out of bank money. The homeowner or the buyers are all out of personal money. And the builder is all out of resources because they don't have any more money. So you get to a stalemate towards the end, and it can be a really unpleasant situation. Now, I want to say that this is probably not common, and it's just something to mention. But it goes back once again, using our famous word here, but trusting your builder. And, it's something to be aware of, right? You want to make sure that whatever price the builder is quoting you from the very beginning is accurate to some sort of degree. And if they say it's accurate to 5%, 10%, well, maybe you seek a bank loan or have personal financing that's going to allow for a 10% overage, worst case scenario, right? I don't know, Bryan, any other additional thoughts there?
You as the homeowner cannot find yourself in this position, right? Us as a builder, we never want to find ourselves in that potential position where there's no more money to go around. The bank does, in the case of getting a construction loan, the bank does their due diligence to try and avoid this situation. But it's just something you have to be aware of and feel very confident going into this type of contract that I'm not going to find myself in this position. And if you have any hesitancy or concerns that you may find yourself in this position, I think it's up to you as the homeowner to take the lead. You can't expect anybody else to, as much as they maybe should, to pump the brakes and say, if you don't feel comfortable at all that, hey, this might be a little too close for comfort, you have to take a good hard look at how to proceed. Do we find a way to make this house cost less, or can we go get more money from our secret piggy bank or the bank or a friend or family? But this is the last place you want to find yourself. So not here to scare anybody. It's more just the awareness has to be there that you need to do everything in your power to not find yourself in that position.
That, and being very aware of where that initial estimate or the initial price that the builder throws out for a cost plus contract. And that's something they should be able to tell you very confidently how they arrived at those numbers. Now it's up to you to determine if you feel comfortable with what they're telling you. But yeah, really good points there.
And that makes it, and just want to touch on something you said earlier, that it can help you, but it can also be very difficult to compare two cost plus contract proposals with two different builders, right? Because you not being in the business and hiring a builder to provide the service of building you this home, you're not supposed to know, okay, well, one builder quotes $80,000 for a foundation and the other one quotes $120,000 for a foundation, because you have that transparency. What does that tell you? How do you proceed, right? Is the 80,000 a legit number? Is the 120,000 too high and they're just trying to set your expectations a little bit higher? But that might be the right option, is to go with the builder that's more expensive, because on paper at the beginning, because at the end of the day, it might actually be cheaper, right? And you just don't know. And that's, Steven, we're going to beat this word to death, but that's where it really comes down to the trust and the understanding of what is in this cost plus contract. So really the message and the takeaway there is, when you are comparing builders that are providing a cost plus proposal, it's very, very difficult to compare them, but you have to understand the differences and ask the right questions.
Yep. Very, very, very important points there that you just made. That is why it's so hard, and I probably phrased it wrong, to compare builders apples to apples. It's almost never an apples to apples comparison, for the simple fact that they're all using different suppliers and manufacturers and different materials to quote you that initial number. And for that reason, it would take a lot of legwork to figure out what each builder is providing you in each of those quotes. For instance, cabinets, is one doing prefab cabinets or prefabricated cabinets, where the other one's doing full custom site built cabinets? those aren't apples to apples, but those are two line items in a very, very long cost breakdown that each builder is going to send you. And that's just one example. There's probably hundreds of those examples where the cost could be varied greatly, and it's just so hard to compare. So yeah, good little note there. And I think a good way to wrap this up, Bryan, is maybe let's tell the listeners what we have found success in, right? That's maybe a fun way to wrap this up, provide some more insight, and then sign off on this one.
Yeah. What do you think? I'll throw it back at you.
Well, I want to preface this by saying that I'm sure there's other successful ways to do this. There's builders across the nation that are probably looking at very different circumstances than we are. But what we have found in this post-COVID era, where things have settled down pretty greatly and have solidified or stabilized, and we'll say that we're in the middle of 2023. So for time reference there, we have found the best success going with fixed price contracts because it protects our buyers the most, knowing that they have that comfort in that, we'll call it insurance, security blanket, whatever we want to call it, going into the contract, that we feel confident, we have done the legwork, all the pre-construction stuff, to feel confident in these numbers that we are giving you for your exact home on your exact lot with all of your specifications, to know that this is the price it's going to cost us to build your home. And that gives us a lot of peace of mind. It gives our buyers a lot of peace of mind, and it allows everybody to plan accordingly, right? They can go get the bank loan that they need, or they can borrow family money, or however they want to finance it. They've got that answer up front to feel very, very good that we might not come in 100% accurate all the time, but we're going to come in pretty dang close. And we've done the legwork to feel comfortable with that. And we know that any overages are going to fall on us, the builder, right? Not our buyers. We don't have to have that difficult conversation to go back to our clients and ask for more money, or the bank. So yeah, I think that's a little bit more about our position on this, but we tried our best to not make this a biased conversation or a biased opinion on these two contracts. So we hope that we've presented both of these in a light that is very matter of fact.
Absolutely. I think the important thing is that we believe there is no right or wrong here. It's understanding what you're getting into, being knowledgeable and educated on which one you prefer, and what type of contract you would like to sign based off of what builder you have that trust level with. But here at Breven Homes, we have done both forms of building contracts, and have found in our experience that the fixed price approach is a much better experience for us as well as the homeowner, right? But the homeowners first is that there is so much less anxiety, and you're not constantly thinking or referring back to or looking at the numbers throughout the build. And a cost plus, even if you're coming in on target, you still don't know it until the very end. So you can't get your mind off of, hey, how are we tracking to the initial estimate, right? Even if it's dead on at the end, we come in at exactly 100% of the initial estimate. You cannot have the peace of mind with the cost plus contract, because it's your money, right? Rightfully so. And so we have seen greater success and a much better experience for the homeowners in that fixed price agreement. So great time, Steven. This has been a fun one. I'm glad we've been able to take this one off the list of topics that we wanted to address, because, well, as we said at the beginning, we've talked about this one, and it's as important as any other one we've done thus far.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one was a doozy, and I'm glad we covered it earlier on in our podcast so that people have this to refer back to.
Good stuff. I don't know how much time we have, but I know we can call it a day.
Yep. Yeah, with that, just want to thank everybody for listening. And we'll be back for next week's episode on a different topic and have a fun conversation there. So catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks, y'all.